Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Beggars of Life. This is continuing my series of reviews where I try to review as much of William Wellman's filmography as I possibly can. Unfortunately, his two films he made between this and Wings, The Legion of the Condemned and Ladies of the Mob, are both lost. However, this is still available. It's about a girl played by Louise Brooks who kills her guardian. It's not her. The reason I say guardian and not parent is she was adopted by this guy, and he basically used her to make food for her and do icky sex stuff with her, just feel her up and things. But there's a lot hinted at in silent film. She kills him at the beginning of the film, and then Richard Arlen comes to the house and is asking this guy if he can have some breakfast, and he finds out the guy's dead and that Louise Brooks kills him. Richard Arlen also worked with Wellman on Wings, so I guess Arlen and Wellman got along pretty well. I actually think I like Arlen more in this than I did in Wings, although he was still good in Wings. Louise Brooks, she tells Richard Arlen's character about how she killed her guardian. She does it in this cool, it's almost very experimental how Wellman showed it. While she's telling Richard Arlen the story, she's kind of faded over the actual sequence of him harassing her and her shooting him. Louise Brooks is telling Richard Arlen the story of how she killed her guardian and why she killed her guardian. And it's a really interesting and powerful sequence. And to avoid anyone spotting Louise Brooks, Richard Arlen's character decides that she should dress as a boy so no one will recognize her, because they'll be looking for a girl and not a boy. And so she dresses as a boy, and her and Richard Arlen go and hop trains together in trying to avoid anyone recognizing that a girl's being a hobo, because girls, I guess, weren't hobos in those days. They're traveling around the country. They sleep in a pile of hay. They make a little kind of an igloo out of hay, basically. Richard Arlen makes it. And then they run into Wallace Berry, who's kind of the king of hobos in this hobo jungle. They're trying to avoid the police, because the police are eventually, they find out, are looking for Louise Brooks. And Richard Arlen considers turning her in, but then doesn't, because there's a reward of $1,000. And Louise Brooks and Richard Arlen kind of fall in love. It's sweet, but this film is also very dark. One of the things I noticed when I watch Wings is that the Wellman that I think most of us know from his 30s pre-code stuff, and I think that's kind of the Wellman that most people like to remember, even though he did stuff after that, of course. Most of what we know of Wellman is this anti-authority, experimental, ballsy studio director. And Beggars of Life is much closer to that stuff than Wings is. And this film is a very dark movie. It's really a sad tale of how she had to shoot her guardian. She's never had parents, and she finally gets a guardian, and that doesn't work out. And even the guy she's with for most of the film, for a majority of it, doesn't really like her, and doesn't have the greatest faith in humanity that you'd expect from a lot of silent film. It's based on a book, Beggars of Life, by a hobo author, Jim Tully. Louise Brooks saw the stage production of the play, which the film is based on the stage production, which is also based on the book. I think they used elements of the book and the stage production. I don't know either very well, but Louise Brooks was taken to the stage production by Charlie Chaplin, who was a big fan of the stage production, saw it many times, and one of the times he took her. This film was actually kind of ahead of its time. I mean, this came out pretty much a year before the Depression started. I mean, the stock market crashed on September 4th, 1929. This came out on September 22nd, 1928. Louise Brooks at this time was more known for flapper roles, and she was a lot more carefree and fun, and this is depressing. She has to dress up as a boy throughout most of it, so no one will notice her. It's a very unglamorous role. It's a lot darker. Critics at the time didn't seem to really know what to do with it, and it was ahead of its time because in a year or so people were going to be doing this in droves. William Wellman made a film quite similar to this called Wild Boys of the Road only 5 years later. He even had a character that his wife Dottie played that was very similar to the role that Louise Brooks played. And Louise Brooks, I think, does a great performance. This was made before Pandora's Box. It's her last American film she made before leaving to go to Europe to make films like Pandora's Box. And Wellman and her seem to have gotten along. He apparently even offered her the role that eventually went to Jean Harlow in Public Enemy, and he wanted her to do it, and I think they worked very well together. But she didn't want to come back to Hollywood, and she just wanted to be with her lover in New York. This film shows her range as an actress, because I think it's a little different from what she did in Pandora's Box. Richard Arlen kind of has a better arc than certainly she does, because he kind of doesn't trust her at first, but you really, as an audience, you're going through her, kind of like almost the Luke Skywalker kind of role. She's introducing you to all the hobo life through this character, but I thought she was very good in this role. She has a certain magnetism, even when she's dressed as a boy. I think she looks kind of glamorous, but I think she can still portray being kind of a hobo and being on the run quite effectively, even though she still has that glamour about her. Beggars of Life was an early sound film. This is right after The Jazz Singer, and much like The Jazz Singer, this has one sequence that has sound in it. Unfortunately, that sequence is lost, but they recorded it, and apparently it was released with a sound sequence in it. Walsberry has a song in it, but unfortunately that sequence is lost, so none of us can hear it. But it did have a couple sequences with sound. I don't get the impression it was very crucial to the picture. When I watched it as a silent film, it didn't really bother me too much, not being able to hear what was going on. I think maybe that would have been a little distracting, so maybe it worked out. Supposedly Wellman invented the boom mic when they were shooting this. No one's really sure if that's really true or who really invented the boom mic and how revolutionary it really was to put a mic on a stick, but supposedly he came up with an idea to make a boom mic for this film. I like Walsberry. He's a character in this film, certainly one of those supporting roles that you really have to come in and dominate, and I think Walsberry did a really great job. I'm curious if anyone, while they're making depression films, thought back at Beggars of Life. I mean, certainly when Wellman made Wild Boys of the Road, I believe he certainly did, but this was the 1920s, this was the roaring 20s, things were going great, and this a desperate side of life, and I think it shows more to like Wellman's instincts, because when I think of Wellman, I think of more stuff like this. It's not as dynamically shot as Wings, I don't think it's as visual as Wings. He used the cinematographer Henry W. Garrett on his next film, Chinatown Nights, and on several other films after that. He didn't work with Harry Perry again, which is unfortunate because I really like what they did together on Wings. I don't know if there was an argument or they didn't get along. I've never really found out much about their relationship. But this film, unfortunately, there is a restored version. It only plays in theaters and supposedly maybe on TCM. That seemed very unclear to me. You can watch it online. The quality of that print is really awful, and I hope at some point somebody releases a quality version of Beggars of Life. I mean, Louise Brooks, I think, is one of the bigger silent film stars for most people because of Pandora's Box. There's such a break between when silent film ended and when sound film came in, just because the economic situation changed so rapidly and the technology changed so rapidly, so there is kind of a jarring difference between the two. This is kind of a transition film. You know, I don't think they realized it at the time, but this really feels to me like a transition film because it feels more like a 30s film, but it's made in 1928. Wellman's tendencies go way more with 30s films. He's Wild Bill Wellman. He's kind of an outlaw. He got arrested for grand theft when he was a kid. A Girl and Shooting Her Guardian is a film that he can really portray. Once he's done Wings and he can do films that he really can sink his teeth into, I think Beggars of Life is like that. It's a film that he can really do something with and have some fun with, and you can see that through this film, and it definitely shows me how he could make the films he made in the 30s and how they could be even more finesse than most directors in the 30s or Hollywood directors in the 30s, because he had effectively made a 30s movie before anyone else was even starting to make 30s movies in a way. Wellman apparently thought it was one of his better silent films, and from the three I have seen, I definitely agree. Not as great as Wings, certainly, and not as well shot, not as epic, but it's not trying to be. It's more simpler, much like the 30s films and the pre-code stuff would eventually be. So if you have seen Beggars of Life and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments, and subscribe if you would like to. And next week I will be doing the film Chinatown Nights, and that'll be Tuesday or Wednesday. Most likely Wednesday, but maybe Tuesday. You never know. And thanks for watching.